To our listeners in the Gambia, Ghana, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. This edition begins in Togo, where over 4 million people are voting in parliamentary and regional elections today. These elections are ongoing amid increased political tension following the approval of a contentious new constitution earlier this month and the subsequent crackdowns on opposition protests. Critics argue that these developments could enable President Faure Gnassingbé to extend his family's lengthy hold on power. In contrast, the president's ruling Union for the Republic Party asserts that the new system enhances democracy and representation. The government, on the other hand, is seeking to maintain its majority with targets of 113 parliamentary and 179 regional council seats. There are 2,352 National Assembly candidates and 2,312 regional council candidates contesting in these elections. Former Vice President of the Gambia, Fatoumata Jallow Tambadjan, is leading the ECOWAS observation mission to Togo for today's parliamentary regional elections. Sankula Janko has more details in this report.
This mission aligns with the provisions of Article 12 of the ECOWAS Supplementary Protocol on Democracy and Good Governance, representing the regional organizations' support to member states for their elections. Led by the former Vice President of the Gambia, Mrs. Fatoumata Jallow Tambadjan, the mission comprises ambassadors from member states accredited to ECOWAS, alongside representatives from the ECOWAS Court of Justice and Parliament. All the members of the mission are representatives from civil society organizations, media professionals, and election observer specialists from the West African region. The deployment of this observer mission follows the recommendations of a pre-election fact-finding mission that visited Togo from April 15 to April 20, 2024 to assess the preparatory phases of the elections. Today, the mission will monitor the elections as Togolese citizens head to the polls to elect lawmakers and the country's first regional representatives. Prior to this, they engaged with key stakeholders in the electoral process. For Newslink and West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Sankula Janko reporting from Banjul.
Still on the elections in Togo today, authorities have announced the closure of the land borders of the country at midnight of Monday, April 29, 2024, which is today, to protect the sanctity of the electoral process. In a joint communique issued by the Minister of Territorial Administration, Decentralization and Territorial Development and the Minister of Security and Civil Protection, the ministers emphasized the importance of this security measure to optimize the voting process and ensure a peaceful electoral environment. They called upon all users of Togolese borders and the general population to cooperate and demonstrate a sense of responsibility in complying with the directive. The statement added that the closure aims to facilitate the smooth and secure conduct of the parliamentary and regional elections, fostering a serene, socially cohesive and peaceful voting atmosphere. In Mali, the Constitutional Court has declared as inadmissible the requests to confirm the end of the transition from two magistrates and prosecutors' unions, as well as some civil society organizations. According to the country's higher court, the plaintiffs lacked the legal capacity to come before the court over the matter. The Constitutional Court also deemed itself incompetent to annul the decision to suspend activities of political parties and politically oriented associations. Imo Edit reports.
Approach to confirm an institutional void marking the end of the transition. In its decision last week, the Constitutional Court indicated no vacancy in the transitional presidency. It deemed the request inadmissible. The court then specified that only the president of the National Transition Council and the Prime Minister could bring an action before the court. The civil society organizations that filed the suit at the court have cried foul over the court's judgment. They accuse the court of ruling on the vacancy of the transitional presidency instead of confirming the decisional void created for which it was petitioned. Muhammadu Konate is a lawyer and a member of the Bahraini Yeriwa movement.
La Cour n'a pas dit le droit. La Cour a évité de répondre.
The court has no right. It avoided answering the question posed by these two organizations. The very legal problem posed by the inquiry has not been resolved by the court. The court rather decided to set its own question to allow it adopt this position of rejection.
Lui permettre d'adopter cette position de rejet.
The unions of magistrates and prosecutors who also petitioned the court over the matter have outrightly rejected the decision of the court. Mohammed Sharif Kone, president of the Magistrate Trade Union, speaks.
If it's a constitutional court that says it is incompetent to deal with questions bordering on constitutionality, then we don't really know where we can go from here. In any case, we are going to keep on fighting, and we are going to show the Constitutional Court that it's not there to do as it pleases. It is not there to please the armed soldiers. It is there to serve the Republic. It is there to state the law.
In another ruling, the Constitutional Court also declared itself incompetent to annul the suspension of activities of political parties and associations. According to it, this falls under the jurisdiction of the administrative section of the Supreme Court.
Imo added with that report. Over to Cote d'Ivoire, where the Action for the People, a civil society organization, has announced an action plan to demand a transparent presidential election in 2025. The citizens' organization launched an initiative called Delegations of Community Mobilization at the grassroots level over the weekend in Abidjan. The objective is to raise awareness among the population about the stakes of the upcoming presidential election and the importance of holding a peaceful election. Oge Oberika reports.
In its action plan, Agar pour le Peuple announced, among other things, a series of upcoming demonstrations starting in September to demand an inclusive presidential election in October 2025. To mobilize the population, the civil society organization has set up delegations for community mobilization at the grassroots level. These delegations consist of several groups of about 30 people who will engage with the population in the Abidjan district and the surrounding 4 regions. These delegations will also interact with local chiefs, youth organizations, women's groups, and various ethnic communities in the targeted areas. The goal is to raise awareness among the population about the stakes of the upcoming presidential election and, most importantly, to promote an election without violence. The organization is advocating for an inclusive election. This comes as political alliances are already forming with the election approaching. Eligible and non-eligible candidates are beginning to position themselves. Several opposition parties are also calling for a revision of the electoral boundaries and reform of the Independent Electoral Commission, the body responsible for organizing elections. The citizen organization also aims to mobilize the population to combat the high cost of living.
Oge Oberika reporting there.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Now, in Nigeria, tragedy struck on Sunday on the Okene bypass in Kogi in the north-central Nigeria as a devastating incident claimed the lives of 19 people. According to Nigeria's Federal Road Safety Corps, the head-on collision involving a truck and a van was caused by a route violation by the truck, resulting in an inferno. WADR's Usma Umara describes the scene as one of utter chaos and destruction, with wreckage and debris scattered around the road. He has more details in this following report.
At least 19 people were burned to death in an auto crash involving a Dangote truck and a Toyota Hiace bus on the Okene bypass of the Okene-Lokoja Highway in Kogi, north-central Nigeria on Sunday. Among the survivors, one is currently receiving treatment for the injuries sustained. Emergency responders swiftly arrived at the scene, evacuating the deceased to the mortuary and transporting the injured to the hospital. Before their arrival, there was widespread confusion and chaos, with bodies scattered throughout the area. A spokesperson for the Federal Road Safety Corps, Jonas Agu, confirmed that both deceased and injured individuals have been evacuated to the mortuary and hospital for further processing and medical care.
They died on the spot here. security agencies, road safety, everybody here have been able to evacuate the dead bodies to the hospital, the specialists, Lokoja and the Federal Medical Center, Lokoja too. The vehicles have been removed, but the people in the bus, including the driver of the bus, died on this spot.
Meanwhile, in a separate incident, residents of Itaoshin area in Abeokuta, Ogun State, southwestern Nigeria, were left reeling after a tanker explosion rocked the neighborhood. The blast sent shockwaves through nearby buildings, shattering walls, ceilings and doors.
There's only one person died. I can say it. We are here. There's only one person died. The driver ran out immediately he saw the incident. He tried to help the motorboy to come out, but the guy was trapped. So immediately he saw the flame, the guy started running. That was what alerted everybody in this area to start moving as well.
If we look at it, probably from the main road to, let's say, 200 meters from the main road, houses were affected.
For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
Still in Nigeria, at least 19 children have died due to a suspected measles outbreak in the northern part of Adamawa. Adamawa State Health Commissioner Felix Tawami said in a statement during the weekend that measles were detected in more than 200 children in Mobi North local government area. He stated that medical personnel and medicines were quickly sent to the region and assured that children with severe infections will be referred to specialist hospitals. The outbreak was reported in Yola on Saturday, leading to a quick mobilization of medics and drugs to affected communities. The commissioner said the medical team would move from Mobi to Gombe local government area where another outbreak has been reported. However, Mr. Tanwami blamed the refusal of parents to immunize their children for the outbreak. The Gambia Immigration Department has recently arrested 5 Senegalese nationals for migrant smuggling in the Gambian coastal town of Gonja. The smugglers were intercepted while attempting to transport migrants to the Spanish Canary Island. Meanwhile, the Immigration Department also intercepted a migrant boat carrying dozens of people, including Malayans and Senegalese. Addressing the press, spokesperson for the Gambia Immigration Department, Mamadi Daban, stated that this operation is part of recent efforts to combat the illicit act of people smuggling.
All 5 people were proved to be Senegalese nationals. 3 out of the 5 are resident in the Gambia, but the remaining 2 came into the country with the intent of conducting an irregular migration activity through the Canary Islands. 24 other people who are believed to be suspected migrants were also suspected at sea somewhere along the coast of Gunjur. Acting on this tip-off, our officers coordinated swiftly with the Gunjur Fire Service Station, and that helped us to rescue these people at sea and bring them to safety. Altogether, 13 people are believed to be Senegalese, 12 Gambians and 5 Malians. Few days ago, a similar activity was foiled somewhere in Bara, leading to the interception of 9 individuals, and a boat and a boat engine were recovered as part of the operations. These operations are part of the numerous other operations that were recently conducted that are all believed to be irregular migration activities surrounded or masterminded by people smugglers, with the intention of taking them to the Canary Islands through the high seas.
He is a spokesman of the Gambia Immigration Department, Mamadi Diban. Stakeholders in sanitation and water resources are calling for reforms in the supply of water among West African states following revelation of insufficient supply of water in the region. The Economic Community of the West African States, ECOWAS, has bemoaned a significant drop in access to water in countries with unstable political environments. They are calling for intensified actions and measures to address the menace, specifically in rural areas. WADR's Nadedetete reports.
Speaking at the inaugural Regional Water Seminar in Accra, Dr. Abubakar Bari, President of the Technical Committee of the Global Water Partnership, emphasized the urgent need for ECOWAS member states to implement measures for effective water resource management. According to him, the call is prompted by the anticipated scarcity of water in the coming years.
If there is not enough water supply, people will migrate from one place to another. So you will have a conflict in between new coming and those who were there already fighting about the resources. Behind that, you have also all these armed conflict groups using that opportunity also to create a mess in the sub-region by controlling the water resources. Most of the time the problem is access to water. The access to water is very different from one place to another. But in many cases, in most of the West African countries, access to water is still very low. So very few people do have that access. So basically it needs to be improved, like in the rural area mainly.
Director of Legal and Monitoring at the Ghana Water Resources Commission, Dr. Bernadette Araba Ejay, underscored the significant challenges confronting water supply in the country. She highlighted that water source pollution and rapid urbanization are the primary factors exacerbating the water crisis.
The problem that is faced when it comes to supply is where the resource itself either is polluted or unavailable, and also where the carrying the water to communities, sometimes there are also some challenges. Basically in Ghana, we don't really have a problem of the water reaching certain communities, but sometimes communities develop at a rate faster than the supply. So you find that there are areas that may not be mapped out for supply yet, but people are there. And so you have to find means of supplying them.
For WADR, Nadidi Teti, Accra.
You are listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Over 4 million Togolese head to the polls today in parliamentary and regional elections amid tension over constitutional reforms. The Gambia's Immigration Department arrested 5 Senegalese nationals for migrant smuggling. Mali's Constitutional Court declared inadmissible requests to confirm the end of the transition. 19 people burned to death in devastating car crash in north-central Nigeria. We do have the press review, guest interview, and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Remember, we are streaming live on YouTube at WADR and also Facebook, WADR English Service. Liberia has instituted some reforms intended to properly administer and protect intellectual property rights in accordance with international best practices. The disclosure was made over the weekend when the country joined the rest of the world to celebrate World Intellectual Property Day. WADR's Darlington Pogban in Monrovia has a report.
Intellectual Property Day is celebrated globally, with countries reflecting on the crucial role that intellectual property rights plays in fostering innovation and creativity worldwide. During the celebration in Liberia over the weekend, Kame Koboy, the head of the country's intellectual property office, emphasized the need to standardize Liberia's intellectual property regime.
While regulating enforcement rates and prosecutions remain a core part of our enforcement strategy, I'm calling on all Liberians to actively oppose to intellectual property infringement in all its forms, as it undermines creativity, innovation, and our collective pursuit of sustainable development.
Luz Konkpen, the United Nations resident coordinator to Liberia, also highlighted the significant potential that the intellectual property sector has for the economy, while calling for the full enforcement of intellectual property rights.
In 2019, the United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution to set aside each year the observance of World Creative Economy Day and to ensure that creative economy can advance the Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals. This is essential as the creative economy provides all countries particularly developing economies with a feasible option for development.
As the country charts a new path, authorities have called for the prosecution of those criminally violating intellectual property laws with a specific request for the offense to be non-bailable. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Darlington Porker in Monrovia.
This is the Newspaper Review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the Newspaper Review.
The Newspaper Review.
Today's press review takes us to Abuja, the Nigerian capital, for a brief of front pages of the national dailies and online news portals. Let's join Usma Umar.
Hello and welcome to the press review segment. Let's start with the Daily Trust newspaper. Petrol scarcity worsens nationwide. With riders, depots have run out of stock, marketers. Another rider, we are not in short of supply. This is coming from Nigeria National Petroleum Company Limited. Meningitis kills 85 persons in Yobe. Yobe, of course, is in the northeast of Nigeria. 19 burns to death in Kogi auto crash. Let's move quickly to the Guardian newspaper. Forex rates harmonization. Central Bank of Nigeria abandons unification policy, reintroduces discriminatory rate. And finally, we go to the Leadership newspaper, and Leadership is leading with this story from the National Assembly. Fuel subsidy removal necessary for Nigeria's economy. This is coming from President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. He was speaking yesterday at the ongoing World Economic Forum in Riyadh, the political capital of Saudi Arabia, and the president participated in a panel discussion, where he talked about the reforms being carried out in Nigeria and why the fuel subsidy had to be removed. He said it was to save Nigeria from going bankrupt. Now, calls for new constitution. National Assembly turns deaf ear, proceeds with amendment. Definitely, this is also another very important issue that will, dominate most conversations throughout year 2024, particularly from the point of view of the National Assembly. There is an ongoing movement for constitutional amendment, but the National Assembly is more interested in ensuring amendment of certain sections of the Constitution that will only be taken care of by the National Assembly. However this turns out, of course, the civil society organizations and other non-governmental organizations are on top of this issue to ensure that Nigeria has a constitution that is reflective of the current realities the country is going through. And this is the much we have for you on this edition of Press Review. From me, Usman Umar, I hand you over back to the studio.
Usman Umar there with the Press Review.
Politics, analyses on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Let's take you back to our first story about the ongoing parliamentary and regional elections in Togo. The elections are ongoing amid increased political tension following the approval of a contentious new constitution earlier this month and subsequent crackdowns on opposition protests. Kopep Tabuga is the Secretary General of the West Africa Civil Society Forum. He weighs in on the matter.
People in Togo are wondering who they will elect to come back and reverse this kind of laws, because it wasn't really a consultative process and people were not satisfied with the law, despite the fact that the legislatures still went ahead and passed it. So what this election ushers in is a new, form of government entirely for the country when the citizens are not fully prepared, not fully sensitized to such a process.
What do these elections mean for democracy in general, including those opposition parties that have been raising issues regarding the constitutional reforms?
Thank you very much. In very clear terms, I would say the elections itself fundamentally proceeding from a foundation of undemocratic processes. Even though, yes, this law that ushered in, a new system, or should I say form of government, where the right to elect the president has been taken out from the hands of the people, it's not democratic, because one of the key principles of democracy, especially in recent times, has been popular participation. Popular participation has been completely stamped down because, if the president is the one that picks the most important decisions in the country, then my claims will not be far-fetched. However, I think the voice of the people is very important. It's the process of this new form of government was not consultative. It didn't involve the voice of the people. It's not the choice of the people. That is why you see the opposition and the civil society and activists, standing up against it.
How can the Togolese votes ensure that the new parliament revises this constitutional reform passed by the outgoing parliamentarians?
Well, this would depend on who they vote into these legislative and regional deputy seats and the Senate. Why? Because once you allow the current president to get his people, his party, which is those that have promoted, this particular view or this particular policy, if you allow a majority again from the president's party to get into the parliament, you will definitely not be able to reverse this law. So it is important for the citizenry, the Togolese opposition, the Togolese civil society, and activists, mobilize the people to come out and vote massively to ensure so that they can have people that will go and reverse these laws that they do not agree with.
Kopeb Dabugat is the Secretary General of the West Africa Civil Society Forum. And here is Sankule Janko with the sports.
Hello out there, a warm welcome and thank you for joining us. The dream is over for Dreams FC. The Ghanaian fairy tale makers saw their remarkable journey in the CAF Confederation Cup brought to an end by ruthless Zamalek. After a goalless first leg in Cairo, Hamza Mukhtar's early opener set the Egyptian Giants on their way to a 3-0 victory in Kumasi that secured their place in the final according to CAF official website. Samson Akiola's sumptuous volley and late Mustafa Shalabi's strike put the seal on a professional away performance as Zamalek underlined their status as a continental heavyweights. For Dreams, an inaugural tilt at the African Club Football second-tier competition ends with their heads held high, even if this humbling defeat will sting for some time to come. Having already dumbed out Malian heavyweights Stade Malien en route to the last four, the Ghanaians arrived in Kumasi, buoyed by belief they could create yet another monumental upset, but it wasn't to be, as they crashed out of the competition. And Enugu Rangers on Sunday beat Plateau United 2-0 to hold on at the top of the Nigeria Premier League. They extended their point haul to 57, 2 points ahead of their Oriental brothers, Enyimba, who also beat Katsina United 1-0 to keep the chase of the title hot, according to Sports Village. Initial second place, the team Remo Stars dropped to third position. Following Shooting Stars' 3-0 defeat at Sunshine Stars in Southwest Derby, the top positions are now held by the Southeast and Southwest as the league gets its closing stages, according to media reports. Sports Village also reported that while Rangers and Enyimba are first and second at the moment, Remo Stars, with an outstanding home game, are third, while their fellow Westerners Shooting Stars are fourth. And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
We have come to the end of this edition of Newslink from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, including our partner radio stations, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Mauro Juf for the technical support. Do interact with us via our social media platforms, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram at WADR News, and on Facebook, WADR English Service. I am Augustine Cully. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New Me FM 94.0